So, because of HIPAA, we're going to call case number 2 Cindy with an S. And she's 29 years of age, and the referral question was pre-post procedure findings for cognition, attention and executive function, learning and memory, and psychiatric presentations. And you guys have heard the background. There's chronic poor quality sleep, major respiratory complications, gastrointestinal sensitivities, allergies, long-standing symptoms related to attention dysregulation, chronic anxiety, and a dysregulated stress reaction for coping. And when I think about this, and when I think about when Dr. Avis first approached me, I have an embarrassing but a very honest memory of thinking, oh my goodness, it's time to give Cindy a stimulant and we're gonna call it a day. And boy, was I wrong. And so at the first testing session, Cindy comes in, she's friendly, she's a diligent worker. She is physically exhausted and she has a gray pallor about her face that is oddly similar to a corpse. And I can always picture this. I can always see the gray pallor because I've worked in a cadaver lab. And there was swollenness around her face, excess saliva buildup, and she just white-knuckled herself through the day. And as she worked, she persistently struggled, even with the more simple tasks. Every single task was cognitively demanding, even if I said, pack up and break for lunch. So let's look at the before and after. So before, I have a whole host of things going on. I have floored ADHD. I have all sorts of different anxiety. And then I have these kind of like other underlying areas of clinical concern. There's a disordered eating piece. There's some big, bold reactions to traumatic events. And then there's like what smells vaguely like obsessive compulsive symptoms. And then after, the anxiety is present, but I have to say, if I couldn't breathe properly for 28 years or 27 years, and I couldn't sleep properly for 28 or 27 years, I'd have more than anxiety. Okay? And then the other areas of clinical concern, and we were at that point just over a year out from surgery. We had the anxiety looming, some like ADHD symptoms, but at the end of the day, we're all a little bit on the autism spectrum, we're all a little anxious, and all of our attention's a little bit dysregulated. Like, let's call a spade, right? And if I wasn't presenting this to you guys, I would never even mention those other areas of clinical concern, right? I mean, we've all eaten the entire bag of M&Ms for dinner. I prefer peanut, okay? We've all done it. And so what happens pre-procedure and post-procedure, okay? And so what's critical here, Cindy is one of these individuals of high intelligence. And so when we go, like my little guy, my Joey at the beginning, from 75 to average, I make a big jump. So if I'm thinking about any of these measures, believe it or not, and some of my fellow statisticians in the room will get it, for me to go from, we'll say, like a 6 to a 7, it might be one item. But for me to go from, we'll say, a 15 or a 16, it could be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items. The more we go in either direction in terms of doing really, really well or really not well, it becomes more and more difficult for the score to change. The testing is a depiction of functioning. It is a snapshot of that moment. This isn't somebody's potential. And I had to keep in mind that there were missed and delayed learning opportunities. And there were missed and delayed moments to learn about attention to detail and memory. For post-procedure, it was as if a different human being walked in the room. The person who took that test was fluid and so much more responsive. She checked her work. She reported answers so quickly and so fluidly that it caught me off guard, that I couldn't write them as fast as I needed to, and I had to at times slow her down. And during the pre-test, she struggled with sticking with correct strategies. I think of like a squirrel in the middle of the street who doesn't know where to go, and he's like running toward traffic even though he potentially knows a car is coming. In post-testing, once she realized something didn't work, she abandoned it and moved on to what something else. And maybe that didn't work either, but that was quickly recognized, and then we move on to the next thing. And there was the capacity to integrate information, not in a disjointed, sort of loosely related manner, but in a way that makes connections with that information that was learned in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, high school, and college. And even when challenged, and even when a task was difficult, there wasn't this white knuckle teeth grinding. It was kind of like, oops, I guess I messed that one up. There was a lightness. There was a lot of self-correction as opposed to I don't know. And there were times she answered before I could start my timer. Throughout all of that part of the evaluation, thoughtful, clarifying questions were asked. Not a, oh my goodness, can you repeat the directions again? I do not know what to do. And then there was many, many pieces where she very quickly said, this isn't going to work. Should I move on to the next one, or do I stick with this? So a realization, like, is this where I'm earning the money, or do I move on to the next aspect? Okay. So I know this is huge. I appreciate that. And so I'm going to take everybody's attention to 3 of the numbers here. But if I don't show all this, you guys are going to think I didn't really work that hard, so we're going to go with it, okay? And so the Dellis-Kaplan Executive Function System, or commonly known as the DCAPS, really is the gold standard for adult executive function, okay? And I'm not always a fan of using computer-based methods because I'm up here doing this with you, and even though I have a computer in front of me and it's supporting this process, the computer is not giving the presentation, okay? And so we're going to go through these not one at a time, I promise you. So we'll start with verbal fluency. Verbal fluency is a persnickety task in which I tell you I'm going to drag all the overlearned information out of your head, and then I'm going to say, and now you're going to stop thinking about it. Okay, so I say, so I'm going to give you like a little bit of time, and I want you to say every single word that you need to think about, that you can possibly think of, that starts with a letter, and I give a letter. And then I say, oh, I forgot. There's some rules. And then I say, you can't say numbers. You can't say people's names. You can't say places, right? And so I just keep upping the ante on difficulty. And for category fluency, I say, I want you to tell me all the words that you can think about that are animals or things in a restaurant. But you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do this, okay? But I've already given the instructions, so your brain already started to come up with that bank of words you're going to tell me. And then my answer is, nope, those words aren't good. And then, because I am that person, I really turn the volume up. And we do something called category switching, where I say, I want you to think of everything in one category. We'll say vegetables. And so you're going to think about as many of those as you possibly can. But after you say every single vegetable, you need to tell me about a food. And so, but it has to be a prepared food. So you have to tell me, like, broccoli and chicken parmesan, cucumbers, linguinis with clam sauce, right? And you're switching. And so you have these overlearned pieces of information that are burned into your mind, but you have to keep turning them off to switch, and turning them off to switch, and access another part of your brain. And what is wild here is the first time we did it, the category switching, so the scores were high, right? The scores are high. Cindy is smart, right? She starts out smart, she just gets smarter. But the category switching was extremely difficult. So the scaled score of a 5 is within the 5th percentile. And when we compare the before and after scores on the number of errors that she made during category switching, as well as the fluency of what she does it, the score is a 10, and that's in the 50th percentile. And just because of the type of score this is, the 10 is the highest you can get. And that is wild. And that is absolute evidence to me that this magical procedure, okay, and making sure that you get sleep that is magical and oxygen that is magical, it works. And so when we look at the next one, which is going to be color word interference, which is often called like the Stroop, right? So I show you a word written with black ink, and then I say, if it's written in black ink, you read the word. If it's written in red ink or green ink or yellow ink, you just tell me the color ink. And I'm going to do this timed, okay? And again, As we're looking at these, we see huge jumps. So on some of these, the 16 or the 14 is the absolute highest score you can get. So it's not like we could get the 19. And so the scores jump from whether it be the high end of the average range or the average range to solidly in the high average range. And this is spectacular because this is hardcore evidence. This is numbers telling me this worked. And so now we're going to get to trails. So we're looking at condition 1, visual scanning. And so the first time the score is a 9, it is solidly average, okay? And so I feel like, well, for somebody who doesn't really get air and somebody who doesn't sleep, I was pretty happy with a 9, okay? On the second time around, she does it so quickly, she doesn't tell me when she is done. She stops and checks her work. And the score is still a standard deviation above the mean. This is striking. When we look here at trail making, if we look at all the conditions and I add up all the errors, the first time this happened, at the pre-procedure, the score is a 6. That means she made more mistakes than 91% of the population. That's a lot. That's a fair amount, right? Okay. On the second time, she made fewer mistakes than 95% of the population. The table turned. The table completely turned. Again, these are striking scores. And all of these tasks are thinking about inhibiting an automatic response, thinking flexibly, digging in your brain, coming back with information in a quick, accurate, speedy way so that you can share, I am this smart or I'm having this many difficulties. And then on memory, during the pre-procedure, and again, I mentioned before that when we have higher verbal intelligence, or when we have higher overall intelligence, verbal intelligence is going to be more impacted. And that is going to be kind of like a bigger thing for your life. And when we're thinking about verbal memory, it is the same. So the initial score, solidly within the high average range, beautiful. But the final score is in the 90th percentile. And that's pretty impressive. And so today, we will end with me saying that I hope you are zealots, and I hope you realize that this is a revolution indeed, and it is a real revolution. I was humbled by this experience. And there's just infinite directions that we're going to take this, and infinite directions and infinite lives, human lives. This isn't just numbers in a table. These are children, these are parents, these are people you know that their lives can be improved when they have, oh, that's right, it's sleep and oxygen. Thank you so much.